It was meant to be routine, quiet, formal, respectful. Just a reading of a will after grief had already settled into our bones. But the second the attorney said my name, the entire room fractured, as if the universe had decided to play its cruelest trick. I'm Valerie Morgan. And until that moment, I thought I understood my place in our family's ladder of affection. My sister, Cassandra, had always been the crown jewel. I was merely tolerated. The dreamer. The impractical one. The problem nobody said aloud but everyone carried in their tone. The faint pauses at the dinner table, the polite nods when I mentioned another gallery job, the way my father could make idealistic sound like a curse. So when our grandfather, Richard Morgan, the man who had built Morgan Holdings with his own 2 hands, died, I returned home expecting little more than uncomfortable small talk and a few pointed glances. Nothing prepared me for what sat waiting behind that mahogany door. Grandpa Richard had always seen me differently. Yes, he was steel, anyone who clawed their way up in post-war America had to be, but around me, there was softness. At 13, he bought me my first sketchbook. At 20, he slipped quietly into one of my gallery shows, never said a word, then mailed me a letter a week later, "Don't ever stop making the world more beautiful." I've kept it tucked in a drawer ever since. That one sentence was more affection than my parents gave me in years. But in our household, love was transactional. Cassandra followed the family script, boarding school, Ivy League, MBA, straight into the company. Brilliant, polished, unwavering. She married William Rothschild, golden boy of corporate law. Together, they were the carefully curated future of the Morgan dynasty. And me? I rented a drafty studio in Brooklyn, poured lattes to pay for paint, and prayed rent didn't go up again. I was never in line to inherit. I was barely considered part of the line at all. That's why I nearly laughed when Mr. Reynolds, the family's attorney, began. Cassandra first, of course, $10 million in cash, shares in Morgan Holdings, full control of the Newport estate. My mother glowed. My father nodded, proud. Cassandra, ever composed, didn't smile, but her grip on William's hand was a private victory. Then Reynolds turned a page. To my granddaughter, Valerie Morgan, the air shifted. I leave the contents of a sealed envelope, to be opened privately, in her presence only. The silence was brutal. My parents exchanged baffled glances. Cassandra's face flickered between confusion and contempt. And me? Heat spread across my chest, humiliation prickling under my skin. Was this his final joke? A farewell note? Sentiment instead of substance? My father cleared his throat, smoothing it over. I think this is self-explanatory, he said stiffly. My father and I agreed Valerie needed to find her own path. This must be his way of reinforcing that lesson. I said nothing. Couldn't. My hands were trembling too hard. But when I met Reynolds's eyes, I saw something there, quiet, deliberate, that told me this wasn't an insult. When the room finally emptied, arguments trailing into the hall, I stayed frozen in my chair. Reynolds slid the envelope across the polished desk. His voice was measured, prepared over 5 years ago. With extreme discretion. Your grandfather wanted this shielded from the rest of them. With shaky fingers, I tore it open. Inside wasn't just a letter. It was a revelation. Written in Richard Morgan's uneven hand, personal, raw. He wrote of how he had truly seen me, struggling, overlooked, but never yielding. He confessed something my parents never told me. My grandmother Elise, his late wife, had been a painter before she married him. A part of the family erased, dismissed. He said I carried her spirit. Then came the truth. For over 20 years, Richard had quietly amassed a private art collection, valued at more than $25 million. He left it all to me. Along with a gallery in downtown Boston. A trust to manage it. A luxury apartment above the gallery itself. Locked airtight with legal protections no one could touch. You are my legacy, Valerie, he wrote. Not for the wealth, but because you see the world as it could be, not just as it is. I sat trembling, the paper in my hands beating like a second heart. All those years of invisibility, of living in Cassandra's shadow, of swallowing silence, they collapsed. I had never been lesser. I'd just been waiting for the right light. Reynolds placed a leather portfolio on the table, filled with plans and lists, the collection catalogued, insured, the gallery's blueprints, the apartment's deeds. Every document flawless. My grandfather had been building this future for me in secret for years. He wanted you to succeed, Reynolds said softly. But more than that, he wanted you free. That word stopped me. Free. I'd never been free. Not from comparison, not from expectation, not from the voice that whispered, "What if you fail? What will they think?" Yet here it was, an inheritance that wasn't money alone, but a sanctuary. A life of my own. Reynolds placed a key in my hand. Would you like to see it? We drove through rainy Boston streets until we reached a brick building tucked between a cafe and a florist. 3 stories tall, wide windows glowing faintly in the dusk. My gallery. My future. The doors groaned open. Inside, raw hardwood floors and white walls stretched wide and tall, begging for art. Light poured through the high windows. I could already see it, exhibitions, opening nights, voices mingling in the air. Upstairs, the apartment was warm, spacious, full of possibility. A fireplace. A sunlit corner perfect for painting. A kitchen without judgment. I stood in the middle, whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." The months that followed were war. My father filed challenges, claims of manipulation, of mental decline. But my grandfather had been meticulous, video testimony, medical records, witnesses. Every stone overturned and secured. Cassandra kept silent, but I could feel her fury pressing against the walls. I buried myself in the work. Renovations began. Reynolds introduced me to Julia, a woman in her 60s who had run one of Boston's finest galleries. She had been my grandfather's confidant. "He trusted your eye," she said with a small smile. "Told me you had your grandmother's soul." She became my guide, teaching me everything the business side of art demanded: contracts, consignments, insurance, shipments, logistics, curating. I knew almost nothing when I began, but I absorbed it quickly. I spent hours inside the temperature-controlled vault where my grandfather's collection rested. Each piece left me breathless, works by Basquiat, Richter, and rising contemporary artists whose brilliance hadn't yet been recognized. And then I found the part that stopped me cold, a section labeled simply Valerie. 12 of my own paintings, bought anonymously over the years. The heart of the collection, the curator whispered. I traced the frames with my fingertips, overwhelmed. My grandfather had been building me up long before I realized it. Still, the loneliness lingered. The silence from my family was heavy, like waiting for a call that never came. I kept hoping for a word, a visit, some acknowledgement. Nothing. Yet in that emptiness, something unexpected grew, calm. One gray afternoon, with opening day drawing near, the bell over the gallery door chimed. I looked up from an unfinished sculpture to see Cassandra, drenched from the rain, her trench coat plastered to her expensive shoes. "You're really doing it," she murmured, scanning the half-finished walls. I didn't answer. "I didn't come to argue," she said after a sigh. I stayed quiet, waiting. She walked slowly through the space, pausing at one of my canvases, blues tangled with gold, a piece I'd titled Inheritance. "It's beautiful," she said softly this time, without her usual edge. "Thank you." She turned, her voice dropping. "I still think it wasn't fair." I held her gaze. "Maybe. But I think you always had what you needed." This was what I needed. Her eyes flickered, then softened. "Maybe I just didn't see it before. Maybe none of us did." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close. And oddly, it was enough. We stood there surrounded by half-hung paintings, the smell of wet paint in the air. Cassandra seemed out of place, like a ghost wandering through a world that no longer belonged to her. She touched the back of a chair I had restored from a flea market, almost grounding herself. I didn't realize he planned all this, she admitted quietly. None of us did. Mother cried when she learned the gallery was real. I didn't know either, I said. Not until that day. A small smile tugged at her mouth. He was always full of secrets, wasn't he? I didn't reply because for me, he hadn't been a mystery at all. He had revealed himself in sketches, in letters, in small glances across dinners where no one else saw me. To them, he was a businessman. To me, he was the only one who believed. You'll have your opening soon, she asked. 2 weeks. The theme is transformation. Her eyebrows lifted. Fitting. I searched her face for sarcasm, but none came. She was sincere. You should come, I said before I could second-guess it. She hesitated, shoulders tightening. I don't know if that's a good idea. It's not about them, I told her quietly. It's about me. She gave a small nod. I'll think about it. And then she left. After she was gone, I stood in the center of the gallery, letting the weight of it all wash over me, the fear, the excitement, the grief, the wonder. My family might never embrace this version of me. But I didn't need their permission anymore. The following weeks blurred together, installations, press interviews, adjusting lights, finalizing signage. Julia pushed me to display 3 of my own paintings. Your grandfather wanted this, she insisted. Don't hide. Opening night arrived. I wore a simple black dress that had once belonged to my grandmother, tailored to fit. The gallery buzzed with life, collectors, artists, students, strangers curious about the new space on Tremont Street. I moved through them like in a dream, introducing creators, explaining themes, sipping champagne I hadn't paid for. And then I saw her. Cassandra. Standing near the back wall in a deep blue dress, alone. Her eyes moved from painting to painting until they stopped on inheritance. She didn't move. I walked over, heart racing. You came, I whispered. I wanted to see it, she replied. It's beautiful. And alive. I didn't know art could feel like this. I smiled. Neither did I, until I let myself believe it mattered. She turned toward me, hesitating. You've built something real, Valerie. I'm still angry. I still think we lost something. I didn't take anything from you, I said firmly. This was never about money. Her voice dropped. I know. That's the part one didn't understand. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But for the first time in years, we stood side by side as sisters, not competitors. When the last guest had gone, I sat alone on a velvet couch near the entrance, shoes off, the quiet warm around me. I looked at the bronze plaque by the door, Evelyn's Gallery. In honor of Elise and Richard Morgan. I thought of her watercolors, hidden away for decades. Of his letters. Of the belief that I was always enough. And I thought of the girl who once cried in the back of a gallery, invisible to her family, now sitting in the center of her own world, no longer waiting to be chosen, because she had chosen herself. 3 months later, a letter arrived. Valerie, your mother and I have been reflecting. We still don't agree with all of your grandfather's decisions, but we can't ignore what you've achieved. If you're open to it, we'd like to meet for lunch. James Morgan. I read it slowly, not with anger but caution. Could they really change? Did I even need them to? Eventually, I agreed, on my terms. Healing wasn't smooth. It came jagged, through awkward conversations and half-open doors. But I no longer needed their approval, only room to grow. A year passed. The gallery flourished, 6 successful exhibitions, 3 emerging artists landing major sales, a feature in Art Quarterly calling Evelyn's a beacon for silenced voices. I launched the Morgan Foundation, funding grants for underrepresented artists, mentoring high schoolers who reminded me of myself, quiet, bursting with color, just waiting to be seen. And still, each morning, I touched that plaque and whispered, "Thank you." So if you've ever felt overlooked, told your dreams don't matter, that you're too different, too impractical, I want you to hear this: your worth isn't negotiable. Not by your family. Not by society. Not by anyone blind to your light. You don't need permission to shine. You only need one spark, one person who believes in you. And if no one else will, let that person be you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please subscribe to Tales by Mille and share it with someone who needs the reminder they matter.